Hello, everyone. Welcome to Refresh. This is our time to connect, to be inspired, to learn something, and ultimately feel a bit better about the time we spend together. And that is what Generation W is all about. 'Tis the season for graduations, and to all who have someone adored making the leap into a new phase of their lives, listen, it could be nursery school, kindergarten, it could be junior high, it could be high, it could be college, it could be graduate school. We wish you and them congratulations. I had the opportunity to attend a high school graduation last night. 480 shiny, bright high school seniors who had made it through the gauntlet of their senior year. Ready? We think for what's next. The profession of pride and relief palpable, and the pride that I personally felt when their salutatorian gave her remarks. I was very emotional. Hope Friedman, a Generation Wow girl since she was in junior high school. She actually founded the first middle school Wow Club, sparkled in the moment. And as she has since we've known her, she was really special and remains so. So congratulations to Hope. For those of you who don't know, Generation Wow is our Teen Girl national program that's all about the positive and possible. We say congratulations to Hope as she will become a Princeton Tiger. And of course, to her parents who have sweated over every exam, I am sure. As I looked around at the parents, sighing in relief and wiping a tear here and there, grandparents glowing in the know that their kids did well, it's a reminder that we do all come together as communities, filled with love and acceptance and appreciation for every person in that room. I have to say, public education does have a way of bringing people together, teaching us so much more than what is in our textbooks, thankfully, but how we meet our neighbors, learning and living together so we can ultimately find that special place of leading together. Loving our communities is a rich mix, that salad mix that is America. And that's why I love celebrating today, a very special month, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And we're happy to wrap around our arms around our greater community and celebrate two amazing Asian American women. There's millions of them, but today we have two really special ones with powerful voices and powerful stories. And I'm thankful, both of you, to Jeannie and Gia, that you will share them with us today. I can introduce you each, but I thought maybe, and I can always back you up, maybe you each can tell us a little bit about your story and how we found you today to share in this special celebration. Jeannie, you want to go first?
Sure. How many minutes do I have?
Jeannie, oh, that's right. I do have. We're gonna have. We will converse throughout the 45 minutes we're together. So just give us a little positioning here.
You got it. You got it. Okay, so I'm an immigrant. I came to this country from Seoul, South Korea, with my dad and two siblings back in 1974 when I was 13 years old. Landed smack in the middle of New York City, and then had what I would call a very typical immigrant experience. Had to learn the language from scratch, went to public school system in New York City, then decided to go to Boston to go to college there, which was amazing experience for me. Graduated in 1984 with a chemical engineering degree, decided to stay in the Boston area and work for one of the only utility company in New England called New England Telephone. Figured I'll stay there for a couple of years and then get a job in some chemical engineering industry. Not to be. I spent 28 years at Verizon Communications, retired in 2012. And since then, I have been working on public company boards, private company boards, some nonprofit work. I advise and coach and mentor senior leaders and CEOs, particularly in the tech space, to help them scale their organizations. I sit on the board of an amazing women mentoring organization called Women in America, which is where I met the incredible Donna Orender, and because she was on the board ahead of me, and I learned so much from you, Donna, and we have been inseparable since. And of course, I got pulled into the orbit of Gen W since then, and it's been an amazing journey. So here I am.
Oh, thank you so much, Jeannie. And we're going to go back into those immigrant days, and we're going to talk more about that and what it's like, so we can feel with you that experience. Gia, how are you?
I am doing so well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talking to you, Donna and Jeannie, and also to the Gen Z. Oh my gosh, I say that a lot these days. These Gen W attendees today. So thank you for having me. My name is Gia. I currently live in the Bay Area. I am a daughter of Hmong refugees from Laos, and my parents came here in the late 70s and did things like lived in Providence, Rhode Island, moved here to the West Coast, which is where I grew up. I went to Sac State, so I'm a state college person and got my degree in journalism, and also there's a minor in there, but it doesn't matter. So got my degree.
It all matters.
I got my degree in journalism and then left California and have moved all around for my job, which is in TV news. And so lived in Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon. I've lived in Kansas City, Missouri. I've lived in Phoenix, Arizona. I moved back to Fresno for a stint, and then I moved out of California again to Minnesota, to the Twin Cities. And now I'm here back working for NBC Bay Area as an anchor and reporter. And I also, while I was living in Minnesota, helped co-found the Very Asian Foundation, which is an organization that shines a light on Asian experiences through advocacy and celebration. It started because of a viral moment that happened to my friend Michelle Lee, who is also a TV news journalist, and she is a Korean adoptee who her parents were very wonderful growing up and put her in Korean heritage school. So she had a lot of connections to, kind of her culture, her Korean culture. And so she had said something on New Year's Day about eating Korean dumpling soup, and it turned into a viewer who called and had the audacity to tell her she was being very Asian and very annoying and needed to keep her Korean to herself. And that's how the Very Asian Foundation sprouted, was through that racist voicemail. So I know Donna because once we started the foundation, I basically had 2 jobs now, one that doesn't pay at all, which is totally fine, one we do with passion. But
that would make 2 of us. Go ahead.
Yeah. But our executive director, Suji, and Donna, you all are friends. You know each other.
We're friends.
And Suji is actually in LA currently doing a book drop-off that we can talk a little bit more about, which the Very Asian Foundation does. So she's currently.
I love that book program. I love that book program, and I'd love to definitely talk more about that. Both of you, obviously, well, as you both said, are immigrants. You're first generation, Jeannie. And I believe, Gia, you're 2nd generation?
I guess I would technically be 1st generation too.
Okay, 1st generation. Tell us a little bit about your growing up experience. I mean, America is a big country. We call ourselves a melting pot, but do we melt as quickly as we need to? We talk about othering at times. I love that word because I think everybody feels like an other once every now and again. But tell us a little bit more about your experiences, if you would. Gia?
Me first. Okay. Well, I mean, that's a big question. So I'm always like, where do we want to start with that? Because I think when I was growing up, my first language is actually Hmong, so it's not English. And so it was, my parents were refugees, so they were only speaking Hmong to us. So my upbringing was very much like, as I grew up, I was translating for my parents once I started going to school at different appointments and whatnot, right? And so you always become this like translator because it's a necessity as a child of refugees like myself. So things like that, or I would sit in front of my TV as a kid watching the news with my parents at 10 o'clock at night before bed, and they would ask me, so what's happening here? What are they saying? I only see the images, and I would have to explain to them what the newscaster was saying. Understanding that it was very, very difficult as a person who grew up in a family where your parents didn't speak English and was trying to learn the language to find stable jobs, find stable housing. So that was definitely challenges in our lives. understanding that I couldn't really play sports growing up because my mom, I played soccer in high school, and I made varsity my freshman year. And after that season, my mom said, do you mind? And she was very, soft with it. She's like, do you mind if maybe next season you don't play soccer? And I said, why? And she said, it's just really hard with, all the kids to go pick them up at different schools and drop you off and then have to pick you up too. And I have 9 siblings. And so I completely understood where she was coming from. And so I didn't play soccer anymore after that. And, sometimes I wonder what it would have ended up like if I did play. Apparently I was good enough to make varsity my freshman year, but it's also the way that the cookie crumbles for me. I got and understood where my mom's situation was. And I understood that, I had a role to play in that as her child. And so, so those were some of the experiences. And then as I grew up, I think I got into this industry called TV news, and I learned how to start hiding parts of myself, my Asianness, right? I wouldn't tell people, kind of what I ate for breakfast or dinner or whatever, because they wouldn't get it, and there would be a lot of questions. And so then I started doing what I did, and I just was disconnected, and I felt very disconnected to the person that I used to be, and I wanted to feel more connected to that person again. So through lots and lots of therapy, I've and constantly coming back to myself, to the truest person that I believe I am. And that includes, my Asian American identity.
Wow. First of all, 1 of 10 kids. Wow. Right. Being the translator for your parents. And Jeannie, I know that you had you have a language story as well. I do want to come back. I want to go to Jeannie, but I want to come back to this whole idea about hiding identities. Right? People of all different culture always talk about either having a mask or not being true to themselves. And I think that's important for us to explore, because a lot of people wonder, how can they fit in? Or am I the only person feeling like this? Jeannie, how about you?
Gia, I love your story. I love to ask you questions as well, because I think it's so amazing.
You can.
So, my experience was interesting, because in the beginning, when I came to the New York City area, actually it was fairly diverse, right? First, I started in Manhattan, and then I moved to Queens with my mom and my siblings. And the schools I went to they were diverse. There were lots of African American, Latinos and Latinas, and lots of Asians, Southeast Asians, Far East Asians. So for me, that growing up experience wasn't so much of feeling like, oh, I don't belong. What I felt like I don't belong was the fact that I had a language barrier. And I made it my mission to make sure that language was not a barrier for my progress. I'm not sure I really thought about like, I want to be like successful and I want to make it, therefore I'm going to do this, as much as I want to be probably like everybody else, and I want to speak the language like everybody else. I want to have that leveling the playing field sort of feeling of, if I speak the language, I can read and I can write, then I'll be able to compete. I was super competitive. So I wanted to make sure that was.
You said you were super competitive.
Yeah.
At some point, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm wiser now. So I like to think. So it was like a singular focus for me. So when I graduated high school, I graduated at top of the class and all that good stuff. And when I went to college, I finally felt like I had taken care of the language barrier simply by learning and self-learning most of the time and keeping my head down. Again, very typical immigrant story. I did not play in sports. Honestly, I was so focused on my studies I was a typical nerdy geek that I didn't have time for anything else, honestly. And YMCA was the only place probably I went to, Donna, to get some exercise in and swimming and whatnot. And I think that was it when I was living in Queens. I actually faced adversity with respect to who I am when I went to the workforce. That's when it really hit me hard from day one, when I entered the workplace, whereby I was faced with practically everybody who looked very different than me. I supervised probably 20 or so field technicians who were all white men, and mostly either Korean War veterans or other war veterans. And they had lots of negative opinions about people that look like me. And they made sure that I knew that. And I think what saved me was, I don't know why, but I never took it personally. And I was more curious about doing the job that I was given and them doing their job and me holding them accountable to do their job as their boss than anything else. And because I was so curious about their skill sets and what they brought to the table, over time to be their supervisor, and ended up having the most incredible experience in every organization that I went to. But I would say throughout my career, I checked my Koreanness at the door, and because I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to make sure, again, that nobody used that as an excuse to hold me back. And at every fight, every situation I faced, I tried to handle it the best I can. There was nobody that looked like me above me. There was nobody that looked like me, period. So I leaned on other people of color as mentors and coaches and sponsors, and they were amazing. Lots of women were supportive, as well as African-American leaders who really looked out for me.
It's so interesting because it sounds like the relatability there is that just somebody who is not feeling like they're part of the mainstream.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to go back to that word other, but Gia, I'm going to come back to you because you talked about not eating food. First of all, Hmong, did I say that right? I practiced, by the way, Hmong.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, one of my trainers here in Florida was Laotian.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that he's never used that. He grew up in Arkansas, which to me was like, how did you get from Laos to Arkansas?
Mm-hmm.
In either case, you wouldn't eat your comfort food.
Yeah.
And I'm interested, why did you feel not comfortable in eating the food that you were comfortable in eating your whole life?
Well, and I think that was also like exploring my life outside of my Hmong bubble that I had lived in my entire life, even through college, because I stayed home for college, right? And so I always tell people, I didn't know that I even liked avocados until I left home. And I love avocados now, but then I left all of that behind. I left all of my comfort foods behind because I was like, no, this is a new me. And like Jeannie, I really resonate with what you're saying when you say, you really didn't have to face that identity piece until you got into the workforce. I think that was very much true for me too. And so because I was trying to fit in so much and I wanted to be successful and I wanted to succeed, that was the thing that my parents always said, we had it really hard. We hope that you guys can do something better for yourself, right? And so I had this also like cultural pressure, right? To make sure that I made something of myself. And so in the warped ways that the world works and society tells you, part of that was also leaving my Hmongness behind. And so I didn't do a lot of comfort food cooking for many, many years. Only recently have I started because I lived in Minnesota for a couple years, and they have such a huge Hmong community there, and it's so
Really?
rich and thriving.
Really?
Yes. it's one of the places that I say, you know, California Hmongs, now that I've moved back, they will tell me, they tell me things like, you know, it's so difficult being Hmong American in this country, and people don't know who we are. And all of that is very true. And I also say, if you had grown up in Minnesota as a Hmong American, you might have a different idea of what it is to be Hmong American, because, you know, there's markets that Hmong people own. There's tons and tons of businesses. We have legislators in Minnesota who are Hmong American, the most in any other state, right? So I think that it's just a different experience. But moving there was something that I didn't realize I needed as a Hmong person. I was able to just kind of see my culture very easily and be around my culture and around my people very easily. And then I moved back here and I was like, whoa, I got to do something about this like food situation. Like, I got to do something about making my own food. That when you talk about healthy is not always, okay, you're just having, you know, a salad and, you know, a water, and it's more than just, you know, making sure that you're doing the food pyramid, right? Healthy to me also is making sure that you're nourishing your soul when it comes to food. And so that is one way that I definitely use now to connect with my culture.
Wow, that's powerful. I'm right. I take notes. If you don't know, now you do know. Gee, I take notes. Food is nourishing your soul and a culture connection. That's powerful. Let's talk a little bit about your foundation, Very Asian. I love the name, Very Asian. You say it fast, Very Asian. What I know why you did it. What's your goal for it?
You know, when Michelle Lee, my co-founder, and I talked about what we wanted for this, what our mission would be, she, as if you have seen her response video to this voicemail, and her station allowed her to do this response video, and she was so eloquent in it. And she said, you know, she's 42, she said, for 42 years, this body has endured all the isms, right, including racism. And this time she was going to say no. She said no. And she said, I deserve, just like anyone else, to bring my full self to the table. And so that's what we're hoping for the next generation, is just that as much as Michelle and I tried to hide pieces of us in all the spaces we went, and Michelle's a Korean adoptee, so she has a unique experience. I'm a person of Hmong refugees descent, and so I have a unique experience. We don't want people to hide themselves anymore, because physically we cannot, right? Physically we cannot hide ourselves. And so that's just, I think, for Michelle, who's raising now a mixed kid, and for me, who has 15 nieces and nephews, as I told you, I have a big family, and now I'm a great aunt. I want them to go into these spaces and not check their Hmongness, check their Filipino-ness, check their Koreanness, check their Asianness at the door anymore, like Jeannie mentioned. I want them to be able to say, like, no, this is a part of me, and I bring a unique experience, and this is what it is.
Well, you know, it's really the beauty of America and the challenge of America, right? What is the balance between assimilation, right, and ethnic and cultural identity? And, you know, America has a history, not a very pretty history, right, of inviting people to do our work, but not really welcoming them. And as you both know well, all of us have heard lately in the news, whether it's coming out of the pandemic, right, the aspersions cast on where this virus came from, that translated to being an anti-Asian movement. And troubling, uncalled for, and yet very present. And how do you live into that? I remember, Jeannie, we would have something happen, we'd reach out and say, how are you, right? Because I am a Jewish person, so I live in the anti-Semitic situations now, which are very prominent and have multiplied considerably. We're all touched by this, which really should bring us more together, not apart.
Yeah, and you know, I always go back to how much the mindset of fear and scarcity in this country has always shaped the way we look at others, right? So, I mean, this country is based on immigration. This country started with others who came here, and incredibly, you know, the whole fact that we actually look at people like Gia and me and say, well, the fact that you may or may not be Chinese doesn't matter to me because you look sort of that way. And the fact that the virus may have come from there. So I'm going to sort of put you in a category where you cause this virus for the world. And I'm going to treat you like that, which means it's negative. And then you go back to history and say, okay, so if something happens, or if a relation between the US and a European country is not good, do you seek out anybody who is from that European country and say, you must also be categorized into that bucket, and therefore I'm going to use my fear to throw all kinds of hatred at you? It just logically, it makes no sense. But what happens is, maybe it's just human nature, Donna. I always wonder about, for us to feel worthy of our lives, we almost need to put ourselves above somebody else.
That was that great book that came out during I don't know if either of you saw it, Cast.
Yeah, exactly.
That was really the whole premise, the thesis. It's a fantastic book, and
it's an amazing book, right? And she really put the thumb on the problem is, and then you say, so what is our obligation, to Gia's point, for the next generations of human beings, no matter where they are, and particularly in this country, and as adults and parents and aunts and nieces, and what is our obligation to make sure that we don't exhibit those kinds of behaviors intentionally or unintentionally, no matter who you are, so that we actually have a shot to making sure that we continue to thrive as a sort of salad bowl or melting pot of those of us from everywhere else.
Right. G, did you say?
I was just going to say, I mean, this country has, like you mentioned, Donna, the history of this country, when you talk about Asian Americans in this country, or AANHPIs, I mean, we can go all the way back to Chinese Exclusion Act. We can point to the Japanese incarceration. We can point to the othering of Asians in those moments. Yes. The Muslim ban in recent memory. So I think that it has always existed. Someone said this the other day, and I really just loved it. And I thought, wow, yeah, that's great. That Asian people, because of the way we look, have always been either very visible or very invisible in spaces. And so in those moments, we are very visible because there's a threat for some reason to people who don't look like us. And so when I talk about what the Very Asian Foundation does, it's doing things like, Michelle and I are also in TV news. So we always say, this is like kind of a thing we say, but we believe it to be true. When Joe Schmo living in Springfield, Illinois can see someone on TV who doesn't look like him, who looks like us, he is less inclined to believe all the stereotypes of Asian Americans. He then just kind of sees, oh, Michelle, that's my morning anchor. Oh, Gia, yeah, she reports and she's a normal person, right? And I have gotten so many comments doing what I do even when I was living in Fresno, California, which is a diverse population, but there would be emails when I first arrived saying, whoa, I've never seen an Asian female anchor. Whoa, I can't believe you're anchoring, you're Asian. And then when I left, I got all these emails of people saying, I'm really sad that you're leaving. I had never seen an Asian person anchoring the news before. And I felt like you were now a part of our family. Or people would say things like there was one email that I got that someone said, I didn't know if I would be comfortable with you anchoring my news. And then I watched you for about 6 weeks. And yeah, it was like, okay. And I was just like, wow, the fact that people even have that thought, right? It comes from somewhere. And so we have to make sure that we are making it normal for us to be in all these spaces and us bringing our full selves to these spaces. So like telling stories that are nuanced of Asian Americans so people understand that our existence is just as important as anyone else's existence.
And
And-
Gia,
and
I have to say, I mean,
Yeah, Jeannie.
the fact that you're in your field, because as we get further segregated out, I feel like we're going backwards sometimes in the way our lived experience in this country, unless you're in mixed neighborhoods, mixed places of worship, mixed school systems. And higher ed is a place where I have opinions about how that can be a place where we bring so many different people to one place based on some mission of goals or targets. But it's so seeing people like us on TV or on some streaming service, for many people it's the only place they get to actually experience somebody who doesn't look like them, right? And it's so critical. It is so critical in my mind. And hopefully it helps them to have a better, maybe not a lived experience, but some closer experience for them to see you, just like they see their own and say, wow, there is no difference. So if you put the black screen on you, Gia, and we listen to you talk as a news anchor, it's like she sounds like everybody else on the news anchor, right? Yeah. And we just have to keep working it. So your presence there is so critical.
So, and I agree, but let me just jump in if I could for a second. First of all, hi, everybody. Welcome to Refresh. Today we are celebrating, if I do the initials, AA, should I do it that way? Because then
NH.
Right, PI, right? And we're selling these incredible women, but the beautiful culture of Asian Americans. And I do have a question on the larger context here. You're Hmong, right? If I said, if I said, okay, let's bring somebody representative, chances are that would not come up, right? For whatever reason, and not bad, good or bad, right? Obviously, there's a familiarity with Koreans in America, far more so. There's over 20 million people in America with roots in East Asia, Southeast Asia, India subcontinent, the Pacific Islands. They speak over 100 languages and comprise over 50 ethnic groups. Now, the expanse of that, I mean, how well, as a group, there's one thing, everybody gets put in a group. But really, how well do you all know each other within that context, right?
Yeah, Jeannie, do you want to go or?
Sure. And I would say sometimes I feel like we have been also conditioned to accept this notion of zero-sum game. And therefore, when other people try to divide us within our community, we kind of buy into it by default. And feel like if there is one spot allowed, which that in itself is problematic, but if there's one spot allowed for somebody that's different than the majority, then why don't you all go and fight it out among yourselves? Because we're not expanding that pie. We're just keeping you in that single slice space. And therefore, for many of us, for lots of reasons, including survival, we have bought into this notion of we need to fight amongst ourselves and not necessarily appreciate all the differences, Donna, you just stated, right? And we have to fight against it.
Yeah.
Right. I also think there's a tendency to think, oh, that's an Asian person. Wait a second. There is, there's Japanese people, right? And then there's Japanese people who come from different parts of their country that are very different, no different than America, right? So when you get into really texturizing all of that, we should be curious and open to people being curious about us. Otherwise, we create these barriers. And those are one of the situations I love about your foundation, about variation, which is exposure. Who are we? See us. I want to know who you are. If you come on my screen for my news, I don't care what nationality you are. I don't care what color you are. I want to know who you are. Right. Aware that however you lived your life to that point is going to be reflected somehow in how you come into my living room.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I think I just want to add to Jeannie's point about fighting for resources, really. I mean, the term Asian American was coined here in the Bay Area, here at Berkeley, actually, Donna, where some groups of Asian Americans came together and they said, okay, the Black Power movement was happening at that time. The American Indian movement was happening at that time. It was like the late 1960s. And so Asian Americans came together because they said, we also need resources too. Everyone thinks we're okay because we're not coming together as these groups to say, hi, look at us. And so I think that when we think about how they came together at first, it was for resources. Now, as we have evolved as a country, as a community, we see that it's really important now that that term doesn't do it justice anymore. It did at the time. But now we need to do things like disaggregate data. So when I talk about it as a Hmong American living in Minnesota during the pandemic, the state of Minnesota had Hmong Americans grouped under Asian Americans. And what happened during COVID was they saw that the umbrella Asian Americans were doing just fine. But when you actually disaggregated the data, Hmong Americans and Southeast Asians were disproportionately doing worse. They were dying more. They were hospitalized more. It was just not, it was not the same as what the actual numbers were showing when it came to Asian Americans. So I think that's a really important piece for us as we move into the future of what AANHPI looks like, that we need to make sure that we are inclusive of all these communities and also looking at data differently. And also to your point, Donna, when you're talking about like, do you guys even know what's going on? Honestly, I don't. I really don't. I just had this conversation with a group of PIs, because when we talk about AANHPIs, we're always like, where are the PIs? And so we just did this Race in America thing that we do at my station, and we brought all these different Pacific Islanders together, and we said, tell us how you guys are feeling about this.
That's brilliant.
And a lot of them said, we feel left out of the conversation. And also they said, but we don't want to dwell on that because we got to take care of our own community. And so it was really fascinating and interesting. And I learned so much. I didn't know so many of the things that are going on with the PI community. And when we talk about PIs, we always think, oh yeah, well, they come from a really beautiful place and people vacation there a lot. And you have to get beyond vacationing there. You have to get beyond, you have to start thinking about the climate change and what it does to the Pacific Islands community.
Yeah.
You have to think about how the US was done to them, and they're just supposed to be a part of this, the US, but they're really trying to find their own footing and their own sovereignty, if you will, in this community. And so I think we don't know everything about these other communities, and we should be more inclusive. And we should ask questions.
And I do like to use the example of when you talk about desegregating data and looking at it. You ask in America, well, how is the water quality in America? Well, usually it comes like it's 95% good. What happens when you live in Flint, Michigan? Right? When you live in Flint, Michigan, the water, you couldn't drink the water. There's other communities, Louisiana. I'm only using that as an example, is that when we tend to create a big group number or umbrella, we tend to lose really all of the specificity, richness, textures, and storylines of the individual groups and people that are living them. So we really need to have both. We don't have much time left. There's probably so many more topics we can talk about, but I really love if you would talk about your book.
Oh, I would love to.
Fantastic. Of course,
well, and this is to the point of everything that Jeannie and I have been talking about too. So our May Book project under the Very Asian Foundation was started because a group of high school kids in Missouri came to us and they said, and they were Asian American students, and they came to us and they said, we went to our school district and we tried to get them to get more books that reflected AANHPI experiences, and our school district largely ignored us. Can you guys do anything about it? And we said, probably. And so we created the May Book Project, which is in collaboration with scholars and educators and librarians and students. And we created a list of books from early readers to young adults. And these are all books that are AANHPI centered or written by, sorry, there's my dog. They're doing construction outside my window, so he's a little nervous. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
So we created this list of young readers to early adults, and we said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give this list to different districts around the country. And if people want to have these books, Teddy, if people want to have these books in their system, we can buy the books for them and put them in the system, because what Jeannie and I have talked about is like, we need to see ourselves reflected in all the different ways. And so that includes titles on school libraries. So if a child goes to the library and says, for example, when I was growing up, it was Mark Twain, right? I had no idea what that life looked like. But now we have people who are authors, and we have children's illustrators, and we can have these books there. So why not put it into schools so kids can see themselves? And not only that, but other kids can see that the protagonist in this story is not just a white person, a white character, that they are Asian or Muslim or, Hmong in some cases. And that's the beautiful thing, is like the experience that we've seen at different schools. We've seen little kids put the books up to their face and say, oh my gosh, you look like her. And other kids saying, yeah, you do. And they're not of Asian descent. And that's what we're needing, is we're needing more people to understand that, yeah, we are also a part of this fabric that we call America, the fabric that we call the United States of America.
Oh, I love this. Just looking at your website, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And so we've done probably 20,000 or so. We put books in the hands of 20,000 or so students across the country, from New Jersey, actually, Jeannie, all the way to LA today. So, and everything in between, because Michelle and I both know that the Asian American experience is not just bi-coastal. There's a huge swath in the center of the country that also needs to see themselves reflected.
Right. But you know what? All of America needs to see you reflected too, whether you're in our communities or not in our communities. You are part of America in its totality. We posted in our chat the May Book Project information. I mentioned to Suji, we'd love to see how we can support with our teen girls, the hundreds that we deal with across America. I think that would be fantastic. I want to thank you both. I am going to leave with this thought, if I can, which you just said. We need to see ourselves reflected in all different ways. And you know what? All of us have to do that. But I'm especially glad that we're focused this month on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, because you are such a rich and beautiful part of our American experience. And we dogs totally agree with that. Dogs. And that's not the construction workers. I think there's some, whatever. Let me just close by saying that we will be back June 7th with Natalie White. For anybody who's been a dreaming, visionary young entrepreneur, wanted to create a product because they saw a need, wasn't sure how to get there, but you know what? No matter how many times people said no, she continued to move along. We'll be back. She's the founder of Moolah Kicks, especially in the women's space, where there's always been a need for products, especially made for women. Natalie White has broken through, and I was one of her first calls early on. It was a cold call. I am so proud of what she's accomplished. I think there's a lot for us to learn from her experience as well as celebrate. Jeannie and Gia, thank you so much. The Very Asian Foundation, count us as part of your community support group, whatever we can do to support you. Jeannie, of course, whatever we can do to support you always. And to our Generation W community, we'll see you on June 7th. Thanks, everyone. And have a great
delightful, Gia. Thank you so much.
Bye, Donna. Thank you, Donna.